As you're going through the process, you have a pile of parts, but they're all tagged, they're all documented and everything. You start putting it back together, that pile of parts is getting smaller and smaller. It's encouragement because you see that all these racks that have all these parts from the airplane, it's dwindling down. That means the airplane is getting more and more complete. At the end of this project, there's always some parts that are remaining when you're done, and that's because this airplane had items that were added to it since World War II. This airplane went to Sweden during the war. It was exported, and that's where it served during World War II. After the war, it kind of bounced around. I know it went back to Germany eventually. It was part of a flying club. It had a tow mechanism added to the back to tow gliders. So it was towing gliders at some point in time. Parts like the tow mechanism, other little modern conveniences, those were removed and we put it back to its original World War II condition. The CMI for this airplane was ultimately chosen. The story needs to be told of Africa, Northern Africa, and what was going on there, like Operation Torch. We had an airplane that was built 1940 in Germany. It would have been the same airplanes that went over to Northern Africa. It's just that the actual airframe we have was picked and sent to Sweden. So the next one off the assembly line could have been picked and put into German service and then sent to North Africa. In the very beginning, you have an airplane that's coming out of storage. It had been in storage for 5-6 years, ever since the Memphis Belle went over. So you're assessing the aircraft, seeing what you think needs to be done initially, which we had torn fabric. We knew there was a couple issues that we needed to correct that had been changed since World War II on this airplane, and we wanted to take it back to World War II. So you get all the fabric off and you start compiling a list of everything that needs to be done. And the guys that I was working with on my crew, worked with them for a long time. So you know their strengths of what they're really good at. So you kind of assign all that stuff to them and you give them a brief overview of what needs to be done. And they're such professionals, they just go at it and knock it out really quick. So that's great. Some of the repairs we had to do on this airplane, at the start of the restoration, we take all the fabric off. We start tagging every single part. We take everything apart. So it's this exploded view of the airplane. You just have parts everywhere. Then that's when you can really assess the individual parts, whether there's any corrosion or damage to metal, damage to wood, or any rot that the wood may have, like for the flooring and all that. This airplane was in really good condition, so that's awesome. You could tell that the airframe had been painted many, many times, so you probably had 4 or 5, some places even 6 layers of paint. It looked a little crude when you looked at it to start with, but you started removing all those layers of paint and you get down to a frame and a structure that is really nice. You can see some of the original stampings that are on there from the original Fieseler factory when it was built in 1940. So that's neat to bring that back. Flooring and stuff, we had to do some wood repairs. A lot of it was just glue joints that had kind of failed. So you would clean that up and redo the glue joints because we're trying to save as much of the original stuff as we possibly can. We're going to really far lengths to try and do that and not just replace it with something new. In doing all that, you get all your parts back together, then it's, as you're assembling it, you have to paint some of the stuff as you're going. So that's selecting all the colors, looking through all the publications, all the books, all the photographs you can get. You're doing all your RLM colors, which was the German colors at the time. That was their whole listing of colors, and the Germans really were specific on what colors were supposed to be what. So that really helps you when you're doing these restorations. So we have like a RLM 66 on the inside. That's the really dark gray color. If you know the history of what's going on with the airplanes, so they would typically come from the factory in their standard RLM 70 and RLM 71 colors, which is a dark green and then an even darker green. So they would have this kind of almost like a splinter camo that was on the airplanes. Well, the airplane we're depicting was then sent to North Africa. So typically those North African camouflage jobs, they would just apply a tan color, which is typically an RLM 79. They would apply that over the top of your standard green German paint job. So it's fun to see the picture. This one was interesting because you could tell it was very much done in the field and not a great amount of care was taken. You know, they're just getting a camouflage job on there. So we painted the whole airplane in the standard German camouflage of green. Then we would have done just like they did and start putting the tan over the top of that. And there's even some areas that we could see in the photograph that they had then retouched with green. So we were able to go in and retouch those areas as well. When you get to the markings, like the national insignias, all the letters and stuff on the side, that was interesting because you could really get into depth on that instead of just designing them and laying them out with tape. I knew that by looking through all of our literature and stuff, the Germans typically had stencils that they would use instead of taping things off. So we recreated those stencils to use. And by doing that, you're spraying the insignia on the airplane and it's giving you a nice fuzzy edge instead of that crisp, clean tape edge. You're spraying that on there and you're like, boy, this is, you're used to that crisp, clean tape edge and it's giving you kind of a hazy edge. But when the product is done, it really looks like it does in the photographs and it's like, wow, it just feels right. So that's a lot of fun.
You take that off and you can see the original valve.
It's interesting, you're working on the airplane and you get in that work mode where it's another airplane you're working on. So you're just focusing on the physical aspect of it. It's really exciting doing that, but once you start digging into all the pictures, wartime photographs of what these airplanes were, that's when it really starts to hit you of what this airplane is and what goes into and what it was doing, what it means to people. So that's when it starts to really get a deeper connection with the history that is part of it. Being a German airplane, it really shows the kind of the context for what our airmen were doing in World War II. This is kind of why they were fighting, because this is an adversary of some of the airplanes that we had. Troops on the ground, this would have been a very feared adversary of theirs because you have generals, commanders that would have been up in this airplane spotting troop movements, and it's a real-time reporting that they could give back to their troops to then send in tanks, send in other troops for the battle. So it's almost like a drone of its time because it's giving that information back and forth. I would say it was very feared at the time because you're doing your operations in the desert and okay, there's tanks and troops somewhere over there and we're over here, but this airplane's reporting on everything you're doing. I know it was a very favored aircraft at the time in World War II by everyone. Whenever they could be captured, the Allies loved this airplane. I've seen pictures of Eisenhower with one, Churchill with one. Everybody liked it because of its abilities, that STOL capability, they're able to take off and land in such a short distance, and also almost the ability to hover because it had such a low stall speed, and if you got the right headwind and all that, it's just a great airplane. The visibility on these, if you're in the cockpit, you see the airplane, you see all the windows, and that's great, but when you're inside, there's almost no restriction. You can see the top of the cowling, where the engine is and all that, but you look around, you can see above you, all the sides and behind it. So that's awesome. On this airplane, you have some unique aspects. You have leading edge slots, which gives the wing more lift. You have the flaps, which extend really far, so you get this big curved wing shape, which is really great. It has the visibility that is, I think, a lot more than most other airplanes at the time. It's an adversary airplane to our US airplanes, Allied airplanes at the time. So that's good to see the different technology the Germans had versus technology that the Americans or British had. It really puts everything into context and gives you the whole picture of that time period and of World War II. Always something I was drawn to, always drawn to the arts, building model kits, which I've said many times before, that these are big model kits. Once you get to a certain point in the restoration process, then you're just painting a model kit. It takes you back to being a kid again. The research process on this for the painting, it's very in-depth. Lots and lots of different publications on Storches themselves, but also on German markings and colorings to select all the proper colors. That's all so fun to dig through all that. And you build little model kits of 109s and all that, and it's a fun paint job, and that's kind of like practice to go into, because you're doing research when you're doing those little model kits. It's just basic research, but you can get in depth as you want, but this is the real deal, and it's just super fun. The cartridges for the flare gun, it gets the wording on it, illuminating cartridges and detection signal cartridges. So it gets lettering here and then down here. These airplanes, they were set up at different stages, 2 people in the airplane or sometimes 3. So you typically have an observer and the pilot. When you have that configuration and it had the gun, like ours will, back seat folds down and there's a smaller seat on the back of that you would turn around and set on, and that'd be your gunner's seat. Being in it, maybe people were smaller back then. I don't see how you fit 3 people in that airplane. It would have been really tight. The airplane is all fabric, so it's pretty involved. The reason it came over here is because it had fabric on the airplane and it had started to rip in many areas. Over time, when you have cotton or linen, all the natural fabrics, you have the dope on it, it just continues to shrink, and over time it rips. Either the structure's gonna break or the fabric's gonna rip. So usually the fabric goes. We wanted to choose a product that would represent what is supposed to be on the airplane, but also last for a lot longer time, so that we don't have to keep tearing into the airplane, because every time you go to do a restoration, you're losing a little bit of, you can lose a little bit of detail. So we don't want to do that over and over. So we chose a polyester fabric. It's a more modern fabric. We applied it in a way that is similar to that would have been done in World War II. So we did the same stitching, we did the same attachments, then we're using the same colors. An issue you can have when you're using modern fabric on an older airplane is it's very stark white in color. But because we're putting these coatings on it, that's not an issue anymore. Even the inside of the cockpit is painted. The inside of the fabric gets painted, so that looks really great, and now we have a product that's going to last for a long time. To do all this work, you have to take all the old stuff off. So the wings are completely wood. So we had Chase and Adam. They went through the wings, stripped all the old fabric off, had to sand all the old glue off. We had to carefully strip all the old varnish that was off to then preserve any of the glue joints, work on that, make the wing structurally sound, put new varnish on, and then it's ready for fabric again. But that's a many, many months long project that's very tedious. We applied a red initial coating on there. It was like the initial coats of dope, and it had a red tint, so we had our coatings tinted to that same color to replicate that. So you have your fabric, you put on your red coat, then you start going with the rest of your colors and all that. So it was fun to do that because it gives you a nice look on the inside where you can see some bare fabric. It shows through red, and that's how it's supposed to be. So it's fun to see that. So we used the underside color, the RLM 78. It's a light blue. That is a really cool color. Really nice version of blue. You don't typically see that on other airplanes in that time period, except on the German aircraft. So it's really neat to see that because it brings a new hue of color to what we have. We were able to get new tires for the airplane, so it's got new main wheels and new tail wheel, matching the old style. Tread's a little different, but you get what you can get. The engine on this airplane, it's an original engine. It's a Argus AS10, so it produces about 240 horsepower. It's an inverted V8. Just a neat engine to see. It has if you know anything about German airplanes, it has the typical mounting system to mount the engine on the aircraft, very similar to like a 109. You look at it and you get excited because you're like, wow, that's a German mounting system, and it's just neat. The engine has all the stamps and markings on it that it should, matching serial numbers and all that stuff. A real point of kind of frustration and headache for me personally is the Y on the airplane that has been turned into an X. So this airplane in books is referred to 5FXK. Well, the airplane is actually 5FYK, and you can see in the photograph, I believe he's some type of officer. I think he's a major standing in front of the airplane, and you can see that the Y has very clearly and crudely been changed to an X. So we had to go in and do that as well with the similar type of contrasting black paint on there to make it look like an X. It's to replicate exactly what the Germans did. We didn't have any information of under the wings, so we referred to other aircraft from that unit that we did have pictures of, and we could see that typically they would spray the underside of the wing with a matching the light blue color. But we did a little slight contrast to that because you can see that in photographs. So you can see where the original letter was sprayed out, and then we were able to spray an X on there. Why they didn't do that on the side, I don't know. Just replicating what is in the photograph. Typically, a lot of fighters and stuff, German World War II, they would have a stenciled on insignia, nose art, whatever you call it. This one you could tell very much in photographs. It has a shield, the badge behind it, that was stenciled on, so that's the black part. And then the flower was hand painted because there's a lot of detail in that. You don't see any overspray, anything, and you see variation between aircraft and aircraft with that flower painted on there. So typical with most nose art applications, I'll look at photographs, then have to scale it to the proper size of the airplane. I'll draw that out by hand, get an image that I like, then I'll put that on the airplane and transfer it. So I'll use a transfer paper to just get a line drawing on the airplane. Once that's on and I'm happy with that, then I apply the paint. It's all hand brushed, and apply the main colors, then you do all your edging and everything. With the paint I'm using, you put on your main colors and you really need to wait till the next day before you put other colors that are going to touch those colors. So yeah, this was a 2-day process, probably took, I'd say about 5-6 hours to paint both nose arts. So that's the Stoffel emblem for the unit that this airplane belonged to. So they're in North Africa. Why do they have a Edelweiss flower on the side of their airplane? Well, the unit from the book that I was doing research in shows that the unit was originally assigned to a mountain division. So they would have been in the mountains where the Edelweiss flower was. So that was the chosen symbol that they had for their unit. Later on, during the war, they did change from the Edelweiss to a different unit logo that had an eagle on it and like the continent of Africa and all that. But yeah, this one luckily has the Edelweiss because it's a really cool nose art to paint. And you're, of course, thinking of the Sound of Music the whole time you're painting. A lot of fun, very rewarding. It's a cherry on top for me. It's a lot of fun. The cockpit was a long process to get that exactly where it needed to be. Seats were mostly original, that the airplane still had it. The front one was very original. The back one had a few modifications to it, so we had to take it back to the way it would have been in World War II. It was missing its rear gunner's seat, so that whole assembly had to be fabricated, matching to pictures and any information we had. Assemble that onto the back of the seat. Had to make all the seat cushions to match what it should have been. There's a flare gun that's to the left of the pilot. There's a mount that's there. It was missing that mount. You could tell where it had been, but it was gone. So we had to fabricate the flare gun mount, get it brazed into the airplane and ready to go. We have the original German type of flare gun. Through additive manufacturing, they were able to resin 3D print a gun. We were able to put the magazine holders in the back to hold the MG-15 gun magazines. They even made a 3D printed gun to serve as a placeholder. There's a bracket that we have to build inside that holds the gun in place. Biggest challenge for the cockpit is probably the gun ring that goes in. So ours is the version that gets a gun ring or could have a gun ring. So we really wanted that to be in there, especially because the photograph of the airplane was chosen has that. Through a lot of looking, through Germany, through people in Sweden, here in the United States, couldn't really find a good example of the gun ring. Didn't have a ring that we could acquire. So at that point, we have to fabricate a gun ring. Through photographs, through part of the original gun ring that's in a Ju-88 in the museum. They have a later version that has an armor plating. You're able to take the armor plating off that gun ring and you have some of the original parts of this style gun ring. So there's a company that we were able to go through here, Rosewood Machine and Tool. They're kind enough to, they're donating their time and doing all the work on this gun ring, and it's coming out amazing. So they're fully making 3D drawings of this whole gun ring, all the parts. They then made a 3D printed version, a fully working 3D printed version, to then put it in the airplane to make sure everything fits. And then they're going ahead with machining out of metal the real gun ring and making all that. The dome that goes on it, we're getting that made from a company, Airplane Plastics here. They do a great job. So they're getting the dome, so we'll have the gun ring in the airplane the way it's supposed to be. But that gun ring started pretty much the day the project started, and it's been a process this whole entire time. We are going to go over to the museum with the 3D printed gun ring and 3D printed gun. The gun ring is still in manufacturing, but hopefully in a month or two here, that'll be wrapped up and we can install it in the museum than with the real MG-15 machine gun.
So I can turn these on, and what it does is it actually reflects off the back of it. I doubt that you're going to see with the lights on. It's one of those where I got to turn the lights out in here. But what it'll do is it'll actually reflect the image off the back of the part and show it up here. And then I can actually measure that from there too.
Got the gear teeth and maybe a couple other holes. So.
Yes, it was. And then it comes out of this big piece.
And it came from this right here. So what you do is you clamp this down, you cut certain areas away, then you reclamp. So the trick here was keeping things flat. You know, even when you cut this away, things can move. So we had to be very careful to make sure all the stress was out of it before we finished it, so they're flat.
Ready?
Yeah, can we start with the bottom right, please?
Bottom right. Also in the cockpit, most visual part, instrument panel. So luckily we had almost all original instruments for the Storch when it came to the museum, I believe in 1974. In storage, those instruments were taken out and stored here on site. When the cockpit was all ready for that, we were able to go down, select those instruments with a few other more original instruments, put them in, get the whole airplane the way it needs to be. It's got all the circuit breakers on the side, it's got the trim indicators, the flap indicators. That was all radiated parts because they used little radium paint to paint all the numbers and indicators. So since the project's done, we were able to put all that in. Now that's all good and safe, but it really completes the airplane, makes it look amazing. Our airplane had the mounting system for the landing light, but we did not have the landing light. Come around on this side and you can see a data plate that's still on it. So this has its anodized finish on it. It may look a little weird on the airplane, but when you look at photographs of a lot of original Storches, you see this huge contrast between the light and then the color that's underneath. And you can tell that a lot of them were installed just in their raw anodized state. They were able to find one in Michigan, an original landing light. So that's an original German landing light. Very nice condition, able to get it, put it on the airplane. So the airplane now has another original part. Putting the prop on is a great part of the process because that's when you know it's pretty much done. You put that propeller on last of the whole thing and it's a good feeling. Neat propeller on this airplane. It's that typical bigger German propeller, painted in RLM 70. So it's that really dark green color. The nose cone that goes on the front of the propeller and then a big bolt to tighten it all down. Then that gets safety. People talk about German engineering. Well, this is a good example. I mean, when you fold the wings, this airplane was built in 1940. It has the original hardware, original hinges and all that. It is so smooth when the wings move back. It takes two people. So if you leveled the airplane, I'm sure one person could do it so easy. When we're back with the tail on the ground, it takes two people. You can bring the wings back, but it is just so precise. All the controls, the ailerons, the elevators, takes no effort. All the bearings on this thing, even though they're that old, they're perfect. Yeah, when you fold the wings back, everything just misses, like the flaps come up over the windows. It's just within millimeters of hitting something. When the wings are out, when you open the door comes within a few millimeters of hitting the fuel gauges, but it's all just engineered that way. And it goes into all the airplanes that we have in the museum, how much engineering and thought goes into building that airplane, because every single thing has to work together. It's not just a mass of parts that's thrown together. It's so engineered out and so precise. 1 year, 6 months, seems like a short period of time, but there's just constantly work going on. Myself, Chase, Adam, Dwayne, we got 4 people here that are working on it. But then there's other people that are involved in the process. Jeff Hellman and Charles Sharp up at Rosewood Machine Tool really go into so much work to make this gun ring. Jeff Rogers at Airplane Plastics in Kinney, got 2 guys working on that to make the dome for the airplane. Pat Harker, good friend of ours that is always helping us out whenever we're looking for parts. He's the one who was able to locate the landing light for this airplane. So it's just big, huge thank you to all of them, because every little thing they do helps us make this airplane more accurate and represent what it should be to people that come to the museum. So a lot of people helped us on this airplane to represent what it should be represented like in the museum. It's very important for people to come see the artifacts in person, because you know, you look at pictures of them and, oh yeah, that's a Mustang, or oh, that's a 109, or an F-15. But until you're standing in front of that artifact, you don't really get that connection through a picture. When you're standing there in front of it, you see the size of it, the weight of it. It really makes a connection with you, and you start to think about what everyone else must have went through back then. The Storch is a really good example. Is you see pictures of it and it's a liaison airplane, it's an observation aircraft. You think it's this small little, almost like a Piper Cub sized airplane. But when you see this airplane in person, it is, for what it is, it's a very massive airplane. So it has a 43-foot wingspan, stands about 10 foot tall. So it has this gear almost like a stork. So it stands way, way high up in the air, and it's just got this massive appearance. Because the wingspan is so big, because it's such a big airplane, it poses challenges for displaying in such a tight setting as the Air Power Gallery, where we have World War II aircraft. So luckily, we're going to be able to display this currently next to the 109, but to kind of save space, neat feature on this airplane, the wings fold back. So they would be able to fold these wings back for transport. They could put it on a train, put a truck, whatever, they could transport this. So we're going to have one wing out and one wing folded back, which will give visitors a unique view at a feature on this airplane, which most airplanes don't typically have.